Really excited to be speaking to Keith Boanas today, a fantastic coach and fantastic coach educator. I'm sure you'll learn a lot from his experiences, his ideas, and his thoughts on the game. Enjoy the show.
Keith, thank you very much for coming on. It's a real pleasure to speak to you. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really good. On our pre-recording moment, as I said, it's a rare day at home for me, but working from home, a lot of admin to do, and we're still allowed to do that. So this is part of my 3 days that I work for Palace for Life Foundation. So we kind of spend one in the office, the rest of it out and about, but we're allowed to nick some time at home to catch up on work rather than have to travel into the offices. It's not a bad place to go, mind you. It's at Selhurst, but yeah.
So what do you do in that role?
That role is probably the latest one that I took on 3 years ago. It's coach development manager is the title. So it was a normal 5 day and flexible role, but it was a new idea from one of the senior management team to have somebody working with the coaches within the organisation. There's coach development, there's mentors within the FA programs, but my job was really more unique towards the foundation and its catchment area, which is obviously quite a big area in Surrey and quite a tough area in and around Selhurst and the Croydon area. So it's developed our own coaches, but also coaches that are connected through partnership clubs, through links to grassroots clubs close to the Palace kind of remit under the foundation's banner. And the foundation's a charitable organisation, but obviously it's connected to Palace itself. So it's kind of using that to get people in to coaching, working with all of their other projects, people into employment, people trying to get away from crime. So yeah, it's been a positive one. It was tough, obviously, because COVID interfered with it for over 1.5 years. So now the contract's ending this month, but I've got another 6 months now to try and develop some other stuff within that role. So I'm actually running courses under our banner, it's a course that I designed, which fits in between level 1, level 2, or C license as it's now called, and the B license. So it's a more face-to-face course than the new online introduction course, and it can kind of go in tandem with that. And we've run 6 courses so far and been really well received. So I'm quite pleased with that.
Now, as a very busy man, you're highly sought after, and you often have lots of roles running at the same time. What else do you do in football at the moment?
This moment in time, I'm head coach, assistant coach, if you like, technical director at Carshalton Athletic in the Isthmian Premier League. I've been there for 5 years now. When I came back from Estonia, the chairman was an ex-student of mine, ironically, like many people, and asked me to go in there and help the player manager, a guy called Peter Adenyi, who I get on really well with. He's a great guy. I love the way he manages his player manager. And I've really enjoyed working alongside him, and we've tried to develop that club as a whole with an academy. It's got a massive youth program, over 450 kids playing out of there, as well as the first team. So I'm kind of overseeing the coaching elements of all of that, and again running CPD for them, and so on and so forth. So in that one, I'm still an FA tutor at UEFA B, just been taken on again for the new C license. So I start the training for that in a couple of weeks. Yet to see how that's going to be delivered. I've obviously seen the tasks and the design, but yet to see how that's going to work. I'm catching up on a lot of in-situ visits at the moment for people that have been held back by COVID. So there's a lot of people waiting to finish their B license and then their level 2. So I'm involved in that. And I'm voluntarily head coach of the English Colleges women's representative team. So we've already played a couple of friendlies. We played Everton, we played independent schools, we're playing Wales at the end of this month, and potentially we'll be going back on tour to a tournament we played in before over in Rome in the Lazio region. And that's kids that have been identified through all of the English colleges connections, and they play in an England kit with the three lions, so it's kind of, again, a great introduction to them, treated as if it is a young England side. So, and one or two have gone on to play for England in the past, like so Rachel Daly and Demi Stokes came from that kind of era when I did it 10 years ago. Before I was doing it before I went to Estonia and had to give it up, but I always retained the links. I used to invite them over to Estonia to play against my youth teams there, so I've always retained the links, and I took over again a couple of years back. And there's one more, last but not least, president of Surrey Football Coaches Association, which is over 50 years old. The previous president was Sir Bobby Robson. Obviously, as Surrey County coach, which I was linked into many of the members, and when Sir Bobby passed away, they asked me to step into that, which was a great honour. And that's got 400 to 500 members and club memberships, and we run regular monthly, bi-monthly CPD events under that banner. And it's a great organisation, and we've kind of outlived a lot of others of a similar ilk. It's separate to the FA, although we work closely with the local county FA. But yeah, I think that's about it for now. Husband, father, that the kids are grown up, so that's not such a problem.
Well, you're one of very few people that we've had on here to have their own Wikipedia page, so you've got that going for you as well.
I didn't do that, and it's got some inaccuracies on it, and overloaded, I think, to a point. But I don't know how to work all that, so I'll leave that to somebody else. But yeah, there's a lot of accuracies, but there's some inaccuracies. But I think Wikipedia does that.
Yeah, it's hard to get stuff past the admins as well. It was in your role of president of the Surrey Coaches Association that I first saw you at a CPD event at Fulham many years ago. And I'll try not to put my nose too far up your crack, but it was a fantastic CPD event. I learned so much from it, and it was brilliant. Especially as I was a very young, inexperienced coach at the time. I honestly can't remember much about it, but I know it had a huge impact on the way that I started to then view coaching. And so thank you for those couple of hours, and it kind of pointed me on the right path with how I now conceptualize the game and how I see coaching in general. So let's get into your first steps as a coach. So you had a playing career as a defender, is that right?
Yeah, only amateur level. I mean, as a very young kid, I was Chelsea Development Centres based in Kent. But then I moved on from serious injuries. I broke my leg twice, and that kind of ruled me out of a professional career, sadly. It's not like the old war wound thing, but it's a fact. So I ended up playing at amateur level for most of my career. I grew up in Stevenage, in Hertfordshire, so kind of Stevenage youth teams. Stevenage were then in the United Counties League. I mean, one of the managers during my time around that era was Alan Gilzine. But yeah, last club I played for down there was Nebworth. And again, a manager down that way then was a guy called Johnny Brooks, who used to play for Spurs. His son Sean played for Palace. So yeah, I had some, if you like, really creditable guys to start with as coaches and managers. But I didn't really think at that time I'd end up doing their job. At school, which is where it really started, I was at a school called Barnwell School in Stevenage, and we had a successful young side there that won, I think it was called the Wicks Trophy back then. But they were all such close friends and wanted to stay together when we quit school. So, right, you're the oldest, you're the manager, you're the coach. And we retained the connection with the school. We used to be able to train there and play our matches there. So, yeah, I was given the task then of running the training sessions. Whilst being at school, teachers had always kind of encouraged me to go into teaching because I was captain of a lot of teams. I didn't just play football, it was tennis, cricket, rugby, anything competitive. So, yeah, you're the manager, you sort this. And so that's how the coaching career kind of started. But it wasn't until 1986 I moved down to southeast London, and I actually quit playing at the time. I thought I was 26, and I thought that's it. I'm not going to fulfill my dreams. So I kind of quit playing, always thinking I'd go down to London and find a team to have a kickabout with and enjoy some football. But when I got into, I actually got a pub. So I was with my second wife at the time. Pauling's now my third and final wife. Yeah, I got this pub, but through being in the pub for a period of time, a couple of the guys who drank, they said, we have a kickabout over Burgess Park, which was close to the pub. And we went for a kickabout. Let's start a team. So we formed the team, joined the London Sunday League, which at that time was the oldest league in London. It's now defunct, sadly. And that grew. It ended up being 3 senior teams, and an under 16 team and an under 12 team in all the local leagues around there. And yeah, obviously I was managing that team and then having to get other people to manage the other teams, but obviously brought business into the pub as well. But that team actually grew into joining the league called the Spartan League, which was just underneath the semi-pro pyramid, and then the Kent County League. And during that period of time, I got the lease on a ground near Blackheath in London when we joined the Kent County League. And I changed pubs by then as well. This is a long story, but needless to say, that didn't go well. So I lost an awful lot of money at that ground. There was a lot of hidden issues that I hadn't researched. I was very naive. I had to make myself bankrupt. It cost me my marriage at that time. So yeah, I had a tough year to 2 years following that. But fate's a funny thing. Obviously, then I moved into near Stratton, and I just started coaching full time, working for anybody and everybody. I had got my A license by then. To cut a long story short, we can go back on that if you wish. And I was starting to tutor by then as well. So it just meant I went full time, and I went and spent some time out in the States. That was my first visit out to the States, out to Rochester in Minnesota. Yeah, it kind of, that's what kick-started my actual, if you want to call it, professional coaching career, where I started to be paid for it and looking at it as a potential profession.
Was there a particular moment where you thought, actually, I like this and I want to do this as a career, or did you kind of just fall into it?
No, even when I'd gone to London in 1986, when I started the pub teams, the trigger really was that Millwall in the community at the time offered the old preliminary award at a local park, Southwark Park, and it was £12. And that was what the original level 2 was, or the C license. It was a week-long course, and it had a written exam, had a referee's exam, and you had to deliver 3 sessions during that week. So it was a technical practice, a skill practice, and a 6v6. And my tutors on that were a guy called Nicky Milo, who was the academy director at Millwall, Leyton Orient, and QPR, to name but a few. He became one of my best friends in years in the future. Unfortunately, not with us anymore. And Les Reed, who went on to become the technical director of the FA, Southampton Football Club, Charlton. And when I was on that course, they said to me, "You're a natural. You should do the A license," which was then the FA advanced license. It wasn't UEFA. You should look to get into this more seriously. And that's what kind of clicked. And I did enjoy it at the time. I've always enjoyed teaching and leading. So the fact that they said that to me obviously gave me that boost. And I actually went away and I did apply for the advanced license. And that was when it used to be 2 weeks up at Lilleshall. Yeah, like Colditz. but yeah. So I actually did that twice. I didn't get it the first time I went. I was on it with many, many big pros. So I turned up in my battered old transit van, and all the pros rolled in their top of the range cars. And there was people like Tony Curry, Peter Reid, Jerry Armstrong, Alan Irvine, Alan Kennedy. The list goes on. And it was the first ever, what was then called the winning formula from Charles Hughes. Not the old Doc Hills one. So that was the first course that was based on that, and it was so intensive. It was red hot. I was carrying a knee problem. I'd actually, from the break, I then developed a cartilage issue, and I just kind of was rehabbing on that. So I was in a lot of pain. was eating painkillers like Smarties. I think I remember trying to take part in the sessions. But that was a massive learning curve for me, just to be amongst those. So yeah, I didn't quite get it that year, but I went back a year later and I flew it. I got through it quite comfortably because I had that experience. And it's that old adage: there's no substitute for experience. To go into that cold was really daunting, but a fantastic memory. I've still got some good pictures of me and Peter Reid and Jerry Armstrong. Peter Reid was fabulous, trying to help me. Took part in all my sessions. Never a problem. Not everybody was like that. He sticks in my memory as somebody who was really humble and gave everything for everybody.
So you've mentioned that you had assessors that said you were a natural. You had teachers that were trying to push you into teaching and kept giving you roles. What do you think it was about you that they must have seen in you to say that you had the propensity to be a teacher, a coach, a mentor?
I just think I wouldn't say I was confident, but I just loved being involved in anything that was challenging and competitive. So in the classroom, I wasn't stupid, but I hated it. I hated sitting down at a desk and basically writing and being told what to do. And yeah, we do that a lot now, and I'm okay with it. But at that time, when I knew there was something going on outside, even if there was another year group playing football outside, I wanted to watch that. And I would watch it and go, oh, I wouldn't do that. I would do that. And if I knew there was a potentially, certainly in the last years at school, where I was lucky enough at our school, we had a swimming pool, an outdoor swimming pool there, and it was the hot summer of '75, I think it was. And I'm thinking, oh, if I wasn't here, I could be down by the pool swimming, and we should be able to get a canoe out and put it into the swimming pool. So I loved outdoor pursuits. I loved every sport. So, but every sport I played, I was always the one talking, encouraging others, trying to help others. And I think they just saw that. They saw it. So I was always made captain of teams, or one of two captains. And that was voted for by players at times as well. It wasn't just the teacher saying you are it. They would say to the players, everyone put a name in to see who you want to be captain. And the players would always pick me. I wasn't a bully in that shape, but I was always like, I'd support anybody. And I was always encouraged. It was always, come on. If we weren't doing well, don't worry, come on, we'll get back in. That kind of element, it was there. And obviously, as you're doing that, by being that kind of person, I think you're also starting to soak in information because you're saying it to yourself and thinking, well, I'm telling them to do that. So I also should be telling them how to do it and telling yourself how to do it. So I think that kind of, again, that triggered what I'd call the coaching mechanism. Yeah, it just kind of built from there.
What have been some of your favourite roles that you've had in coaching?
Wow. I recently had to rejig my CV because my CV, when I did the LMA diploma, they told me the CV was too long. It was more like a book. So they told me to condense it down and go to my 3 highlights. So I would say my 3 highlights would obviously be the Charlton Athletic women's job. We finally won the FA Cup, and we were in the FA Cup final 4 times, won the Premier League Cup twice, and then final again, and finished runners-up in the league against an Arsenal side that were very, very dominant during those years, and Fulham also when they went pro under Fired. So we were always kind of the third in line, but we still managed to always be in the mix and be a thorn in their side. And finally we did, at that time, the FA Cup was the Holy Grail. So to finally win that, because we'd been in the final 3 years on the trot when we won it, was an amazing feeling of relief, ecstasy, and more so pride. And I actually had this conversation yesterday with one of the program editors at Charlton because they're doing a piece on the women's team from that era. It was me just feeling so happy for the players and all the people that had supported the program that they finally got that reward. Even more so for myself, it was just everyone else I felt for. and I could see the joy and the happiness in people's faces. That's long stayed in my memory. Estonia was an amazing time. I know we're going to talk about that again, maybe, but that went from a 3-year contract to 8 years. For me, it could have been another 2 at least to finish the program that I wanted to, but there was reasons for that not happening. But that experience again, and when I left there, I was given something called the Gold Star. There's not everybody receives this Gold Star award. I think the likes of Mark Poom had won it, and previous men's national team managers. But it was for developing the game in the country to such a high extent, and the work that I'd done. It was a really proud moment. It's a solid gold, basically, star, and this one is the gold mark. So this was from there. Where am I going? So this was, and I've also got a statue downstairs of me, which I should have brought up for you. But they gave me it in the Estonian kit, with a little bit of a belly. And an amazing group of people and a lovely place to live. So that certainly would go down as one. What am I going back to? I can't remember what I put as the third one without checking my CV, because it was quite tough to decide because there's been so many. I think the other most rewarding time for me is just seeing coaches that I've developed succeed and move on, whatever level they're striving to be at. And some have gone on to a very, very high level, international level, and certainly in the top leagues in the country. And some have gone on just to be better coaches in their environment. When I see that, because I keep in touch with so many, whether it's just a brief message or a little chat or just emails backwards and forwards, just to see them succeed, that probably gives me far more pleasure than any trophies I've ever won.
So is there a role that you would like to maybe relive or have another go at?
Yeah, I've got a bugbear at the moment about, I think I could certainly look at one more crack at the top level of the women's game. I mean, I applied 1 or 2 times for the England national team role in the women's game, and unfortunately wasn't successful. But I still believe I could have done a job there, and I still believe I could, even now. I mean, I am 62 now, but I don't feel 62 apart from my knees. But knowledge-wise, tactically, I believe I could do it, and I wouldn't be scared to take on any coach or any manager in the women's game whatsoever. In fact, I wouldn't be scared to go and coach in the Premier League. It wouldn't faze me if somebody said to me, "Okay, you can go and coach Chelsea tomorrow, Man United tomorrow, first team." It wouldn't faze me at all. I'd relish it. But the women's game, yeah, I kind of felt I had unfinished business because the way it ended at Charlton, and it's something again we discussed yesterday. Didn't quite get to that league title. And obviously the game's changed massively now, the WSL, and I think, if my wife had been playing now, she'd be on 6 figures or more. And she used to have to pay a tenner a week. So her ability level, she'd definitely be up there in top 3 to 5 keepers in the world, as she was then. She's obviously very analytical about what goes on, but I watch it. I got back involved with Charlton Women last year because the coach there, a guy called Ratish Mishra, just called me. He knew I lived around the corner. Went around and had a chat, and he just said, could you just come along and give me some advice and back up? He's an A licence himself. He's a very good coach. But I think all good coaches are always receptive to extra advice, extra help. I'm the same. And certainly if you think it's somebody that's been there, seen it, done it, there's always something you can pull from that. And he was really open and receptive to that. And I really enjoyed, again, working alongside him. But I managed to fit it in amongst all the other things. So I was allowed to go 1 or 2 nights when I could and be there on Sunday match day, which was probably my only rest day. But I used to go to the games, and I'd stay in the background, say something if he asked me. But I'd normally do some analysis from the stand for him from the height, and then go and give him my thoughts and chat about it afterwards. But he was a really great lad to work with. But when, ironically, Karen Hills came in, who was one of my players back in the day, the new owners of the club, I don't know, maybe I didn't create a good impression, because when they came in, they didn't even know who I was. They introduced Karen to the team, and I was stood there, and they had no clue who I was, or even that I was there. And having had the success that I had, and Karen being one of my players, it was a little bit embarrassing. And then Thomas came in, the new owner, and he started speaking about changing the name of the team again. And does anybody have a problem with that? Well, none of the girls would say anything at the time. And me at the back, I went, I've got a problem with that. So straight away, he's got to go. So I was only taking a bit of expenses. I wasn't really being paid. I was doing it for the passion of it. And so that was disappointing, because I was enjoying it. But yeah, it's, personality sometimes. And if I've got any kind of thoughts on why I haven't got some roles, it's because I've got a reputation for speaking my mind, and asking for things that I think we need, not that I need, that whichever team I'm working for, that I think they need, or the coaches need to move forward and develop. And I'm not scared to go head to head with people above me. And that, unfortunately, sometimes is a negative, because people will see you as a problem. But I can't change. I'm far too long in the tooth to change now. So, but what people do get, if they do employ me or use me, there's no such thing as more than 100%. But if there was, they'd get it. They certainly get 100% commitment from me. And I'm a giver, not a receiver. I will share anything I've got. And I've got literally 3-4 hard drives full of information from every role I've ever been involved. I've kept everything. You're talking about hoarding. I hoard that information, and obviously thousands of sessions that I designed or have stolen. And if there's something I can't find, I'll go and find it for people. So yeah, when people react like that to me, there was times when I struggled to work out why, but obviously I speak to other people close to me, and they always say that's what it is. They're scared of you. They always say they're scared of you. And another reason why I had to condense the CV, because the LMA said the CV will actually scare people. It's too much on it. So weird, but I've had to kind of face the realism of things like that.
And coach educators always say you have to be authentic, and coaches are nothing if not a manifestation of the values for which they stand. So sometimes I think it's good to piss off the right people. It shows that you're pulling in the right direction.
I think you're right, and it's something that I've stuck to. If I believe that it's the right thing, and I do really kind of talk to myself, if you like, on that scale. Is it right? Is it right? Before I go in and have that conflict. And again, it's not even looking after myself. It's more about other people. And in every role I've been in, even going back to the Charlton days, and before that, Tooting and Mitcham was one of my first senior roles. And I would still go into the chairman and say, I need this, I need that, I need that. If you want me to compete, I need this. And there can't be any ifs or buts. But also, if the players didn't deserve something, I'd be the first one to say, okay, we're not going to give them that. They don't deserve that. And I can quote a little story on things like that from Casey Stoney when she was at Manchester United, when she first went in. Obviously, she's an ex-player of mine. Some of her coaching methods are similar to me for obvious reasons. She did a B licence with me. And I know that at one stage, the United players were offered Tissot watches. And she said, no, they're not ready for that. They haven't earned that right yet. Just because they're wearing a Man United shirt doesn't mean they automatically come into line to receive a gift like that. Let's go and win something, do something, and earn it. And I think that applies for everything. Players, coaches, you've got to earn the right. And I believe I've earned the right to go in and make those demands if I feel it's beneficial to the club. And as much as the people, i.e. pulling purse strings, for instance, are going, well, the budget. but I wouldn't ask for it if I didn't think it was going to benefit them and the club in the future. So then I'm questioning their ambition. So why am I here? What do you want me to do? Because you're holding me into this kind of pocket where you don't want us to grow. So then maybe there's no point in me staying, no point in me being here. If we're not looking to grow and make everything better, then maybe it's time for me to move on. And that's happened. You know, I moved on from Watford Ladies for that reason. You know, and I was on quite a decent contract there, but they broke promises to me regarding going into the WSL. And we'd done all the groundwork, and we'd had the interview at Wembley, and we'd been accepted, and a lot of it was on the back of that I was there. And then they decided not to do it after telling me they were going to do it. And I was told in somebody's garage. So I was called to someone's house in Hemel Hempstead and told sitting in the garage that the club didn't even bring me to the ground to tell me. So yeah, at that point I went, sorry, I'm done. But that was all based on principles.
You have to remain true, though, don't you? And particularly if what you're doing is motivated by getting the best experience for the players, then sometimes you go through those bad situations. But let's talk about when you got into women's football, when you were first at Charlton. The landscape has changed significantly. You mentioned yourself that players back then were having to pay a tenner, and that was to play at the highest level. Compared to now, there are still obviously some lingering prejudices. You just need to go through any kind of Twitter comments to find all sorts of tired ironing and kitchen jokes. You know, at least try and come up with something original. If you're going to be a sexist pig, at least be an original sexist pig rather than parroting the old tried and true. But what were some of the barriers that you saw when you first went into it, and how has the landscape changed from what you've seen?
I think I was one of the first, apart from a guy up in Durham. I can't remember his surname now, and it's rude of me. But he was an England manager as well. Ted Copeland, I think his name was. I was the only A licence to go into the women's and girls game back at that time. And I was at Tooting and Mitcham, but then the head of girls football at Charlton Athletic at the time, a lady called Deb Brown, she did her prelim badge with me in Kent. And she said, we need a technical director for our girls' centre of excellence. It was only 2 age groups then. She said, would you be willing to do it? It's just one night a week. And I thought, well, I'd actually done a bit of girls coaching, obviously in the States. So I'd had a taste of the women's game in the States, which again is different because they view it differently. So I thought, if there's anything like it was in America, this could be fun. Why not? I've got a spare night back then. So it was around a place called Cold Harbour, which is aptly named. It was one of the old style AstroTurfs at the time, and it was always freezing. But yeah, started that around there. And the first thing that hit me was not prejudice. It was just how receptive the kids were. The girls were just always a smile on their faces and just doing whatever you asked them to do to the best of their ability. Whereas with boys, you've always got the kind of, dad told me this, mum told me that, someone told me this, I'm going to copy this. And the boys are always, in our country, are always kind of more forward in that respect, certainly back then. But I didn't see or sense the prejudices then with the girls' programme. Obviously, through being involved in that, I started to take more notice of the women's game in the country. And then you could start to see the issues where they were playing at crap pitches, crap facilities, having to pay to play. And obviously, almost 100% male coaches. And a lot of them, when you start to observe, coaching in exactly the same way they would boys or a men's Sunday team, for want of a better way of putting it.
Yes.
So almost like a pub team mentality. And there's always other issues in, you've got the sexuality stuff going on in the women's game, which for me was never an issue. But obviously for other people, when they're looking at it from outside, you heard all those comments. At Charlton, we developed sides and we put a young side into one of the more local leagues, and they played a team in a cup game. Well, that team was all female players with very short cropped hair, if you're stereotyping, and they were actually warming up. One of them had a pint of lager and the other one smoked a cigarette when they were warming up. So for me at that point, that's their choice, and good luck to them. But our young team, which is an under-18 side, is not going to stay in this league, because that's not good role modelling for what we're trying to develop, which was elite footballers. But again, going back to barriers, it would always be ignorance. It would always be what you've just mentioned. And I faced that again in Estonia a little bit when I went there. But it is, yeah, they'd be wearing men's football kit. Some of it would look awful, and they'd roll it over and over to try and make it look more feminine on them, but not to a point where, it got silly. They just wanted to feel comfortable and playing in decent kit, training facilities, and again, you're always second in line. So even back then at Charlton, Cold Harbour wasn't a great facility. It was a facility. So using that, and we had to use the pitches around there, which again were being used for Sunday teams, every team, grassroots teams. And sometimes they were awful. And you've got the old adage, they're covered in dog's muck, rubbish, the goals have been damaged, the nets have been cut. And you're thinking you're trying to run an elite program, and you've got to suffer this because it's not considered important enough to go to the next levels. And obviously that was the start point of everything, and where we started to chip away. Certainly where Charlton were involved in we've got to have better. And to be fair to Charlton, very, very much so, they listened to everything, and it not straight away, but it gradually moved, and we moved into the training ground, even with the girls, and everything became better. But obviously in and around us, it was still happening at all levels, where, to use the term, there were second-class citizens in football terms. So girls and women's teams were considered as second-class citizens. You get that pitch if no one else needs it. Mm. You wear that kit because we've done with it, so you can have that kit. So, as things moved on, obviously, again, sponsors came into the women's game. It started to grow. And, again, credit where credit's due. When Hope Powell got the England job, she was the catalyst, if you like, to raising the awareness of the game and using the national team as a role modelling situation. And again, I tried to kind of follow suit with that in Estonia. That you always say you work from the bottom up, but I felt in the women's game, certainly in Estonia, I had to work from the top down, because I had to create an image and role models that younger girls would want to aspire to be. So yeah, again, I'll be honest, I didn't suffer too many negatives, not to my face anyway. There's probably quite a few behind my back, being involved in the women's game. And I was asked, why would an A license want to work in the women's and girls game? Why? Does that mean you can't get a job in the men's game? So you've done that instead? Well, no, that was never, ever the case for me, because I was working in coach education. I was working in the men's game, and I made a choice. And I think that has happened, where men have gone into the women's game when they can't find that route into the men's game. It's happened, but why not? And why not in reverse? So I don't see that as a major one. There was something else kicking into my head there about smaller kind of isms, but it was never anything that stopped me or made me think, oh, really, do I want to stay involved in this? For me, it grew in tandem with what I was doing in the men's game. And something I think I'm adept at is that I can switch. So I could switch from coaching boys, girls. I can switch from coaching men, women. And I use the analogy a lot on my coach education. I think if you're old enough, you remember Wurzel Gummidge. He had different heads in his barn for different jobs. So you've got to remember which head to put on. So there's an element of schizophrenia involved, but you've got to control it and remember where you are and why you're doing it. But there's no reason why you can't jump across different areas of the game. It does take a skill set, but again, it comes from, for me, never turn down an opportunity to try something. So if I'd have turned down that Girl Centre of Excellence, what would have happened? You know, I spent 6 months working with Down syndrome for MenCap, and that's the third one. That was amazing.
Yeah.
So, and again, even now, I know you had young Reece Barker on here recently. He would call me and say, "Oh, can you come and do a session with my team?" Well, if I've got the time and space, then the answer was always yes. I just lost you again. So I think, you know, grassroots teams asked me, "Can you come and do a session?" Yes. You know, club the other night, close to me in Peckham, said, "Can you come and speak to our coaches on Wednesday night? They'd love to." And then they, "Can you do a session?" I went, "Yeah, okay." So I did just do anything where you can show a continuity of a practice. So I got there and there was 28 women, not necessarily footballers. They were just there. It was like one of these fun sessions where they're coming to do it to keep fit. So he wants me to do now a constructive session to demonstrate to 18 coaches with 28 of probably a high percentage have never been coached. So that was straight away. Now I've got to try and involve all 28 of these players in this session. So I don't want to tell any of them they can't do it. So obviously I had to do the plan B, plan C, adapt in my head. And I did it. And it was really well received. And the girls said, "Oh, can you come back next week?" And the coaches, all I did to the coach was, you know, while I'm doing this, I want you to imagine what it might be for your team. If you had 12 players, if you had 16 players, the theme of the session would be the same. All I'm showing you is how I've adapted it so nobody here is left out. But I want you to visualize it, what it might look like with your players. And so as long as you're relaying that and getting them to see those images, it can still work. But yeah, that's it. And obviously I'm married to a footballer, you know, who's played 60 times for England. So she's a very vociferous and very powerful person. And I think any issues I ever faced, she was always by my side anyway. So I had backup.
My wife isn't that keen on football. Her dad is. And so whenever I go back over to Mexico, he's more excited to see me than to see his own daughter, because it means we get to watch games together. But to her credit, she has downloaded the book Futsal for Dummies, because she's getting really into our futsal team. She finds that a lot more interesting than football because it's shorter games. She doesn't have to put up with the English weather. And has a lot more goals in it as well. So finds that considerably more interesting. Let's now move on to Estonia. What first appealed to you about that role and that location?
Again, there's lots of stories attached to it. I was obviously assistant director at the Beckham Academy in Greenwich at the time when this role came up, and that was a very well paid role, very enjoyable role, fantastic venue and fantastic programs. And I was, at that time I was still involved with the English colleges rep side back then, and I'd just taken on Millwall Lionesses to help them get out of the division they were in, because I knew one of the committee members was an ex-playing colleague of Pauline's, so I took that role on. And I had an assistant or co-coach at English colleges called Gillian Coulthard, who's an ex-England international MBE. She was the most capped player back in the day when they didn't play every week. And she was offered the role, and she actually talked to me about it. And she said she only had a B license at the time, and she was really nervous about it. And she asked me, would I consider at least flying out there to help her and do camps and so on and so forth. And this country, Estonia, and I'd not heard of it. I won't lie to you, I'd never heard of it. So obviously I went home and due diligence started looking on websites and Google and learned a little bit. And I said, yeah, I can do that. Depends on logistically. The Beckham Academy would actually agree to let me go. because if we got chances to go and work abroad with the Beckham Academy kind of influence, then it was still good PR for them, because we brought in students internationally even to the academy. So anyway, turned out in the end Jill just said no, she couldn't move, didn't want to move, because it would have meant moving over there to live, and her situation at the time, she wasn't ready for that. So I kind of didn't even think about it, and I'd sent my CV and stuff along with hers. Then I got a random email just asking would I be interested in going over and speaking to them. It was quite a few weeks later. So I went, oh, okay. So I spoke to my wife, obviously. I said, can't hurt. So I went over there in the July, which over there is quite nice. And they took me around the old town, which is really pleasant. I met the president, and that was an education. So Ivor is a very charismatic character, doesn't often wear suits or shirts and ties. He's got this image of ripped jeans, kind of checkered shirt with a kind of gilet type thing with fur all over it, and very kind of wavy hair with a bit of a beard and stubble. I kind of likened him to the Mad Russian in the film Snatch. In the way he walked in, he was a bit of a presence. So when I first saw him, oh, the president's here, and I'm looking, I'm thinking, where? And it was this guy walking towards me, and I was like, oh, well, I'm suited and booted, mate. So thinking, oh, so I walked up, shook hands, had a chat. Just spoke to me, seen my CV, and kind of shook hands. He said, well, do you want the job? He said, because we really like the look of your CV and what you've done, and it looks like you could be a really good fit. And I'm, yeah, really good. Okay, well, my colleague's going to show you around, take you for some lunch. So one of the guys who works in the office went outside, showed me around the old town, a little bit around Tallinn, had lunch and blah, blah, then took me to the airport. Didn't really sign anything or agree anything totally. And I had to get to the airport, the plane was due. So he took me there, got on it, said goodbye, thanks. Didn't hear anything and didn't know what I was supposed to do. So I think it was 3 months later in the end, an email arrived, do you want the job or not? You haven't sent me a prospectus, you haven't sent me a JD, I don't know what it entails, what am I going to get paid? I'm still interested, but so obviously then it all came through. But this was kind of their relaxed way of doing things. It was, again, it was an education in itself. So I agreed. And I went back again and had another meeting and agreed everything and signed. And started in the January of 2009, I think it was. And that was in the middle of winter. Sorry?
Did you move over there permanently, or were you able to fly back?
Yeah. Well, permanently is a strange one, but yes.
Yeah.
So obviously I had long discussions with my wife, and it envisaged me being there 9 months of the year as part of the deal, because the job wasn't just the national teams. It was to build the game, grow the game. And unbeknown to me at the time, it ended up being involved in their coach education system as well. I didn't know that then, but it grew into that. But yeah, I landed in January 2009 in -10, -12, 6 foot of snow, and got put in the first night we landed, because I had another English guy who came with me at the start for a year, called Peter McGovern. So we went, and it was freezing. I'd left my wife in tears. And I landed in this freezing cold place, and they put us in one of the cheaper motels, which was a really small room with a tiny bed and a TV that didn't work and a fridge that just made loads of noise. And I sat there and cried. What have I done? I left my wife for this, thinking, oh my God, have I made a mistake? But yeah, next day came and picked us up, took us to the stadium, showed us the office we'd have, did a press conference, treated with utmost respect. Obviously did the press conference, answered all the questions that you would, and then taken to the apartment, or 2 or 3 apartments to look at. And one of them was a really nice one in the centre of Tallinn. It's the one I chose, obviously. That's going to be your apartment. We pay the rent, we'll give you a car, we'll give you the phone, we'll give you a laptop. You can work from here, you can come into the stadium, to the office. you start building everything and arranging all the camps and everything. That's down to you now. So that was it. And then there I was. And that was initially a 3-year contract. And it was obviously really successful in the first 3 years. And we did what I said. We built the national team program up first. And there were some, again, interesting moments. My first ever training session with the senior national team was, again, on the evening, -8, ice on the pitch, on the AstroTurf pitch. The players all came out dressed like Eskimos, and I'm standing there looking like Mr. FA coach in my shorts and socks pulled up. I soon went back indoors and put on a lot of other clothing, and all the players were laughing at me. But yeah, learned the hard way again. There was lots of moments like that. And then we did an under-17 training camp, and there was only 20 girls turned up because it's a very small country. Not many young players playing. So only 20 turned up for the trials. And if one or two of them, if I tell you that they couldn't juggle a ball more than 3 times, now I'm looking at my colleague and going, my God, what have we got? What are we doing? Under 10s could have done that better. So it was okay. We've got to go back to basics, which is what we did. We literally stripped everything back to basics and started as if we were coaching babies, under 10s, under 9s, under 8s, for a better way of putting it. And started just teaching basic technical work, basic ball manipulation. And even the first fitness session with the first team, Pete was quite strong on the box-to-box. And as a fitness test, and they were collapsing halfway through it. They weren't fit. So there's loads and loads of barriers in that sense. So it's almost like recreate a structure. There was 2 German guys there running all their boys' youth teams, and they had quite a lot to say for themselves at times about how well they were doing. So also I saw that as a challenge. Well, we're going to get the girls up to that speed. We're going to do this, and we're going to do better than you. That was straight away in my head. So that first 3 years, it went really quickly, but we had a lot of success in the methods that we used, and ended up with the first team, national team, winning the tournament in Armenia, the UEFA development tournament, which we played in a lot of those type of tournaments. Then we came back and we won the Baltic Cup, which is a yearly tournament with Lithuania, Latvia. Sometimes it involved Belarus, and it now involves the Faroe Islands. But then the next rude awakening was the first World Cup qualifiers. So I'd been to the Euros to watch in Finland because I knew our World Cup qualifiers included France and Iceland and Italy. So I went to watch all of those. And I'm making notes and thinking, yeah, I could deal with her, this, that, I can deal with that formation, I can cope with that. And yeah, so we go to Reykjavik to play Iceland. Pauline flies over to surprise me because it's my first World Cup qualifier as a coach, as a head coach. So she flies to Reykjavik. I'm sitting on the bus to go to the game. She gets on the bus with her hoodie up and gives it that. It's only me. And pow. Within 30 minutes of the game, we're 6-0 or 8-0 down. Every attack, every cross, goal, goal, goal. And I'd played a 3 at the back formation against them from what I'd seen in Finland, without realising that my players were absolutely nowhere near their level. So at half time, I changed it to a back 4, flat 4, sort of a 4-5-1, and we held on. We only conceded 4 in the second half, so it was a 12-0 defeat. And Pauline said to me, also, I'm sitting there thinking, you've given up this, and this. The Beckham Academy left me for that. And I'm like, it's a bit blunt, but can't blame you. She said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm not going to walk away. Never walked away from anything. So then it was, let's start again doing our homework. So obviously from that game, we knew we were playing France next in Le Havre. And so I worked really heavily on defending and playing with a 4 at the back. And I almost, when I was playing against those stronger teams, I ended up playing 4-4-1-1, which was 4-5-1 defending. So, yeah, got to Le Havre, 10,000 supporters in the stadium singing Le Bleu. And I've got 16-year-old Estonian kids and this and that absolutely shaking as they're walking onto the pitch. You can see it, even in the warm-up. So I'm trying to calm them down. Come on, we worked on this. As long as we do what we worked on, it's 11 against 11, all the things you say. And at 30 minutes, 0-0. And then they had a coach called Bruno Bini at the time. He'd smoked about 500 fags in the dugout. And he was getting frustrated. You could see it. And but then all of a sudden they scored one and they ended up scoring 6 in the last 15 minutes, mostly breakaways, counter-attacks, one-on-ones with the keeper. And that finished 12-0 as well. But I still took a lot from that first 30 minutes, if that makes sense. And after those games, I basically said to the guy I was working with then and to the players, that's never going to happen to us again. We're never going to lose by that scoreline again. That's my target, and that's your target. And again, it's processes in between, but during that campaign, we also had Northern Ireland, Croatia, Serbia, and Italy. Well, we went on to beat Croatia away, who were ranked 30 odd places above us. We then beat Northern Ireland at home, who were ranked a long way above us. And we beat Serbia at home after they'd beaten us away. And if we'd have beaten Croatia in the second game, we ended up drawing, would have finished third behind France and Iceland. And sorry, Italy was the Euros. My head's gone now. Italy weren't in that group. That was the Euros afterwards. But the second games against Iceland and France were 5-1 and 6-0. So to me, that was massive as well. That was success along the lines of beating those other teams. And the Icelandic coach at the time, who I got on really well with, Siggy, he's gone on to move up quite high. He came up and he said, the improvement's fantastic. What have you done? And I just thanks. It was a massive compliment. And even the French, again, we scored. And obviously they beat us 5-1. But their players are coming up to us and saying, well done, blah, blah, to our players. No disappointment from me in the development process, considering we were ranked 90 or lower in the FIFA rankings. After that campaign, we shot right up to 72 or 74, the highest they'd ever been. So that was success, because my job was to develop. It wasn't to go and win trophies. If we won, the Baltic Cup became a no-brainer for me. When they said to me, do you think you're going to win that? I'm looking at the opponents. Well, yeah, we'll win that. That's realism. We can realistically win that. So that's when I start to take stock of what can we realistically do and what can we do in that area to make sure that we're learning from it and we're developing from it. And that was the process for me. And that's how it kind of continued all the way down through the age groups. And then we started to get kids playing in the schools. We started to do development camps all around the country, which wasn't hard. It's small countries to get around. So me and my coaches would go to the different regions and run little training camps and on a weekly basis. And we had, like, FIFA did something called Live Your Goals, where they'd have big one-day festivals, and they were really good as well. And it just grew. The game grew. I think there was just over 400 girls and women playing when I went. It's now around 2,000 plus. When I left, it was a sad time because they didn't give the job to who I felt they should have given it to, and the program dipped for about 6 months, and then they gave it to Jarmo Mäkinen, who worked for the Finnish and is a FIFA coach, and he managed to lift it up again to a certain extent. They've now given it to one of my ex-players, who was the best player by far in the country. She's just taken the role now, and I'm kind of in touch with her as an advisor if she needs it, and so that's a positive step forward. But yeah.
So coming from a personal perspective, how do you move to a country you've never heard of?
From visiting it, again, if you're, I think if you're, no, I want to say semi-intelligent, I think when you visit a country, you get a feel. I certainly do. Wherever I go, I get a feel for the place very quickly and the people. So initially it was the people that I'd met, and I just got a good feeling from the way they spoke and the way they acted. And the bottom line for me was, regardless of whether it was moving to that strange country or not, it was an opportunity that I could not turn down, having been turned down for the roles in my own country. You know, one of the criteria when I was initially applying for those roles was always international experience. So straight away, now I've got an opportunity to go and get international experience, albeit may not be at that level, but that was an element to it. So, if you like, I threw caution to the wind to a certain extent, but I've always kind of travelled anyway. And I, like I said, I'd previously worked in the States. I'd been over to Australia. I'd been over to Denmark to do a demonstration when I was at the Beckham Academy, and I'd met a lot of international coaches and different people. So, yeah, there was a risk factor to it, more of a risk of how it would affect my marriage, my home life. But again, they gave me that reassurance, and they stuck to their word. I had the flexibility that I could fly backwards and forwards whenever I had a break. Because my wife is now working for the Met Police. She was on shift patterns where she could work a week and fly over. So, and at that point it was Skype, which was invented in Estonia before Zoom and all these came on board. Skype allowed us to keep in touch visually. So the thought process wasn't really about the country. It was all about football. You know, when I'm focusing on football, what's going on outside that is secondary. Obviously it's important, but I just had a feel that it was something I could get my teeth into. It was a blank canvas. It was a project, and it would give me that experience that if I applied for another job in my own country in the future or elsewhere, there's a massive element on my CV, and the fact that I achieved what I achieved. So the fact it ended up lasting 8 years probably cut down some of the opportunities to go and work somewhere else. But, you know, I couldn't walk away from it. I actually, when I first diagnosed all of the issues, I said, this is a 10-year project. So I got to 8, but unfortunately we had a serious family illness. My wife's brother was terminal and she needed me to come home. So we agreed at that point that I would depart. So it's quite sad and tough at the time for lots of reasons, both ways. But yeah.
These are real issues that a lot of coaches who look at working abroad are often concerned about. It. Some of the questions I get the most, and particularly from coaches who are approaching 30. I wrote a piece about this recently where they're starting families. I want to coach abroad, but what I do, it's difficult, and people are always worried about the big one. Well, what happens if something bad happens to someone back home? And I don't think there's an easy answer, but these are real problems that people have to weigh up the pros and cons. Now, obviously, you've stuck at this for 8 years and would have a lot of insight into the different roles. I'd be interested to know, because it's a different culture, and it sounds like at the time an underdeveloped football nation where you've got under 17s that can barely do a handful of keep ups. So I don't think you should discriminate against people that can't juggle the ball. I'm pretty terrible at myself. But what was it like? How did you reach these people, having not known the culture? Was there a language barrier? What makes them tick, and how did you figure that out?
No, it's a great question, and again, it's something I emphasise now. Any advice I'm giving to coaches, certainly in this day and age, is learn a language. You know, learn a language, and obviously Estonian is recognised as being one of the most difficult languages in the world, next to Mandarin Chinese. There's a mix of many dialects. It's a mix of Finnish, Hungarian, German, even snippets of English, and obviously there's a Russian link, and 25% of the population is still Russian speaking. But the Russians and the Estonians often converse in English. So they learn English as a second language in schools. So was there a communication problem? No, most Estonians could understand English. I was offered Estonian lessons when I first went, but going back to the German coaches, they were offered the same lessons and didn't turn up, so they took the lessons away. So I didn't get those lessons. So for me to learn, it would have been learning from the coaching staff and people working with me. And I was fortunate to have an assistant coach called Catherine Kana, who could speak English fluently. Ended up speaking Cockney as well after lessons from me. But she would translate everything, and she tried to teach me Estonian. And it's such a difficult language. It's like listening to a lawnmower going off when they're speaking quickly. But what I did learn was terminology. So I could never learn to have a full-on conversation with an Estonian, but I could sit and listen to them and know what they were talking about. And I learned all of the necessary terminologies, sort of linked to the game, colours, numbers, hello, good morning, goodbye, how much is that? So I could get by. I'd love to have learned it properly, but it would have taken really serious lessons and time, which I didn't have that much of. And the other side of it as well was they were eager to learn from me. So they actually wanted me to speak English because they wanted to improve their English. There was a lot of time I was actually giving English lessons, which was, different. But when I did the pro license in 2012, I was the only Englishman on the course. And there were Russian speaking, Estonian speaking, German and Dutch. And it was a Dutch tutor. So the little old me, the lone Englishman on that course, thinking, how am I going to get through this? But obviously the Dutch tutor, it's a pro license. Of course it's going to be in English. Wow, I'm all right now. But so many of the lectures and discussions were in the different languages. So again, I had to have Catherine. She did the course with me at the same time. And she was interpreting where I needed it interpreting. But that was a fabulous experience. And obviously, I'd applied many times in England and not got on it. So again, going to Estonia, the benefits of going to Estonia and knowing that I was going to be in that role, and this is something I've kind of done some research on. Again, saying it was a risk, I also knew it would open up so many other opportunities. So it wasn't just about going there to be the coach of the Estonian program national team. It was, now I'm going to get to go to this, and this. So I attended FIFA conferences, UEFA conferences, UEFA workshops in almost every country in Europe. I coached at 3 World University Games. I actually helped on a FIFA program at the Women's Under-17 World Cup, where they brought in all the coaches from all the Russian-speaking nations to do almost like a mini pro license. And again, I was the only Englishman on that, and I ended up actually taking some of the sessions because the other staff there recognised that I was a coach educator. Well, can you do a session on this for them? So I ended up being part of that. And those opportunities just wouldn't have come about if I hadn't have taken that. And that's one of the things that fills up my CV, because it's got this workshop, this workshop, this workshop in Spain, in Denmark, in Germany, in Holland, in Italy. And, literally the education experience was massive and it wouldn't have happened. So getting into them as people, they wanted to learn. They were really respectful. Everyone's conscious of the level of the English game. And a lot of them used to come into my office from the other programs in Estonia, from the other, like the league teams, and they used to come in and say, "Oh, can you give me some advice on that? Can you give me some of this? Can you give me a program? Can you give me a pre-season program?" So that's how I kind of got involved in their coach education system as well. The families were different. To try and encourage more girls to come and play, that's again why I had to create those role models and get it out in the public eye. So they had a football magazine there called Jalka, which started having female players on the front cover, and articles in there from the players about what it's like to be a footballer. It doesn't mean you're not a girl anymore, because that was their thinking. If they play football, they're going to turn into some kind of monstrosity with big muscles and start to look like a man. That was, again, they were really that naive. My daughter's going to be a singer. My daughter's going to be a dancer. She doesn't want to play football. She's going to get hurt. So that was a big one to break down. But we did it using that role modeling situation. And doing all the fun stuff. So the FIFA camps, doing loads of fun games. Just bring fun games with the football, where the girls just loved it, going into schools, doing all the little fun games. Look, it doesn't have to be a violent game. It's not something that's going to change you physically. It will make you fitter. It will make you healthy. So again, going down that route, and you actually might like it. And even if it encourages you to take up basketball or handball or one of the other sports that was actually more popular at the time, some of them weren't doing any sport. So by going in and doing the football programs, it might trigger them into just becoming more sports related, if you like. But obviously we did manage to capture a lot of them into teams. So it ended up going all the way down, where it stopped at under 17 when I went in. We had then under 15 leagues, and it went right down to under 10s. But we ran that as like a 1 day little mini tournament. So all the little under 10s teams would turn up at a different area each week and play each other rather than play a league. Well, that used to work really well as well. And it was just a great way of introducing stuff. And just for me, I just think the people were respectful enough to listen and at least give it a go. So the trick was, when they gave it a go, you made sure it was a positive experience that they wanted to come back to. The same as we always say to coaches, make your environment right and somewhere where the kids and parents want to be at and are happy for their children to be at. We had to focus on that heavily. And the hierarchy didn't often say no to me. And that's where I'm going with that. We even asked the first year we were there, we did 2 weeks residential at Lilleshall. We brought the team over to Lilleshall for 2 weeks training camp. And we played Chelsea ladies, Aston Villa ladies, and the English colleges team while we were there. Took them for a day to Alton Towers. That cost the association over 15 grand. Now, I know the treasurer wasn't happy, but it was an amazing, at that stage, at the start of the program, team bonding, and got us to look at every player. Really, in 2 weeks, we looked closely at every player, what they had to offer, and what we could go forward with.
Final question, because now I've taken up most of your time, and it's been great, and I could continue this all day. But I'd like to ask you about some of your insight as a coach educator. What are some of the biggest and most positive changes that you've seen in coach education?
It's a tough one. It's a tough one because it's changed so much since I started. So when I started, it was the old Junior Team Managers Award and the prelim. There was no UEFA B. It was straight to Lilleshall. If you didn't get it at Lilleshall, you got an intermediate badge instead of the advanced badge that you used to sew on. So you used to get the badges, then you sewed on. Then it went to the coaching certificate instead of the prelim, and the level 1 obviously then became the level 2. I think adding the lower awards was a positive because it made people less fearful of starting. Design of those, because the junior team manager was never pushed a lot. You could jump on straight on the prelim or the level 2. You didn't used to have to do the lower award then. Certainly if you played at any level, it was felt not important. Now, as far as I'm aware, you have to do the playmaker and you have to do the introduction before you can do the C license. It's always been called the C license in Europe, the UEFA C, which we called our level 2. So that's now been brought into line with Europe, calling it the UEFA C. The program and session designs have changed each time it's changed. So it went from, on the prelim, you did, like I said, the technical, the skill, and the 6v6, which for me always worked. They were tiring, those courses, because you were on them. And yeah, lots of different ability levels, shapes and sizes, and people would be dead on their feet by the last day, which was then a negative, especially if you were the last couple of sessions on the last day. And you say, I know you're tired. Just don't say that. Don't say that. Your job is to motivate them. So I think the structure has moved on positively to the fact that I feel the in-situ visits are valuable. Going out and seeing people working in their own environment with their own team, I think is one of the biggest positives. I always felt, again, there was a strength to people doing a session on the course as well with the people you're working with, because that created a bond. And I think if you're taking part, for me, I think you learn better. Just for me. I used to love taking part in the sessions at Lilleshall, and I felt I learned more by being in the session than standing on the touchline. Because standing on the touchline, you actually get distractions.
Yeah.
You watch what you're trying to get. So for me, there's still that element, and the way I run the course that I've designed, it's got both elements. So on the course, we do it together. Then they get assessed working with another group, if we can. But yeah, going out, but seeing people how actually are in their own environment. The trick with that is, and I always say it to the people that I visit, look, don't do anything different just because you know I'm coming. I want to see you operating in your environment. It doesn't mean it's going to be a negative or a positive, whichever way. I said, just be yourself, because if you then do something false, your players are not going to understand why you're doing that. And it's not natural for you. So do what you naturally do, because that will tell me that you're able to take on board this qualification, if you like, and what you're doing is relevant to your group of players, which is the priority. Not that you're trying to show me you could coach Liverpool. I just need to know you can coach your group with success, with your outcomes that you need, that you want. But you do see it. And I certainly went to one recently where somebody turned up with a whiteboard. And I said, have you ever used that before? No. Why are you using it now? So your players are looking at, why are we doing this? I could see the players were going, why are we doing this? And so you've done it because I'm coming. Don't, you know, and I think, so the next time he won't do it. But if I didn't do the in-situ visits, again, we wouldn't get that conversation, and we wouldn't have to be able to give that feedback and that understanding of how different people operate in different environments. And of course you get the what ifs as well then. So the importance of the plan B, plan C, where you turn up and they planned it for 16 and 3 turn up. And that's happened. And the immediate reaction to the guy on that particular session was, oh, I can't do it now. So what are you going to do with these 3? Oh, they might as well go home. No. What was your session plan? Show me. Oh, my midfielder receiving and turning and creating play and playing good passes. Okay, well, your central mid, yeah. Is she here? Yeah. So you got 2 more players and her. You got equipment here. You got mini goals. I can see it. Think of something. He struggled, and obviously I showed him. Just set up targets, get the girls feeding into her, get one of them putting her under pressure. Even if you do 30 minutes of just her receiving, taking touches, hitting targets, it's beneficial to her. They've taken the trouble to be here for you. You've taken the trouble to be here for them. Don't punish them because the others aren't here. And there's always a way. And that's a great opportunity to really give her some individual help that you may not have given her if the 16 were here. She's had more individual attention from you, more coaching points than she might have got if you had all 16 here. So take advantage of that individual moment, because it's really, for me, it's still important. In one of my roles at Barking Abbey School, part of the curriculum was individual sessions. It was part of their curriculum. It might be early in the morning, it might be lunchtime, in small groups of 2s and 3s. And I saw evidence that worked in the way they played and their technical improvement. So it's a balancing act. But yeah, I mean, the B license moved on again to in situs, because that used to be condensed into weeks and then coming back together for another week. And there was written exams in there as well, which have obviously been taken out because it's done as part of the project. I think the project design is a positive, getting people to try and cover a season, X amount of sessions, whether it be 12 or 18, do some game and match analysis. I think that's all about building experience and that you can use at every level. And it's important, again, as tutors, that you show them all the different ways you can do match analysis, whether you're using software, whether you're using a pen and paper, and the benefits of that. You know, whether you're using a smartphone or an iPad, or whether you've got top of the range cameras, and the benefits of that. And obviously you're seeing their players as well when you go out. So you've got an opportunity there just to keep on chipping in at what you need for the ability you're working with, where people try sometimes work above the level of their players. when they're doing their badges. And it's not what I want to see as a tutor. I don't know about other tutors. I'm sure I speak for most. You don't want to see them putting on anything false. So that, yeah, in situs would be one of the biggest pluses. Obviously through COVID, so much stuff going online and got lost. It's still massive for me that there's an element of face-to-face. So they've got to keep that in. They have with the C license. They certainly have at this point with the B license. I've been lucky enough to go and view on the A license. So still massive amounts of face-to-face there up at St George's Park. And then again, you're going out to their clubs, which potentially is a higher level. But yeah, I think it's definitely moved on, but there's a lot been taken out of courses that I've re-implemented into even the one I've designed that they stopped covering, that I think is beneficial, even though it may be covered in other ways. But certainly at the starter courses, I think what I do on mine is I go back over the old level 1 stuff to a point and with some add-ons. And one of the things I cover is still the overuse injuries. It used to be part of the course. It's not anymore. But if you're thinking about growing children and the signs and symptoms of overuse injuries and how you should act if you suspect one, that used to be a key element of the level 2. I'm not sure it is anymore. So I'll make sure I go into that because I think it's still a massive issue, especially in these days of AstroTurf pitches and fashionable footwear and things like that cause problems like that. And obviously people putting demands on young players to carry on playing when they've got some kind of injury that they don't understand. So where I've done that workshop on the courses, people are going, wow, I had no idea. Now I'm thinking that lad's had a bad knee for like 8 weeks. You know, he's been complaining about his ankle for 6 weeks. So it could be that. Get it checked. So as it moved forward to shorten it at the end of this, yeah, it's improved. It should improve. Is it perfect? I don't think anything's ever perfect, and I think the tutors are constantly analysing it and looking at different ways of tweaking things and how it can be done. I think the important thing that I know the English FA are really striving to do is to make sure the right people are on the right course. Whereas before it was you could randomly apply. I think now it's being stringent on the selection process without being discriminatory. And, you know, if you want the A license, then you need to want to be working in the pro game or semi-pro game at the lowest. If you're just going to carry on working with kids, B license is probably more than enough for you. Why put yourself through the pressure of the next one unless you now have the ambition to go on and do that? So become better there. Do your CPD, do other qualifications. Obviously, the FA have got the AYA now, but that's more geared towards academy coaches. They took the youth modules. I like the separate youth modules, but they've now incorporated them into the C and B license. But there's loads of bolt-on courses people can go and do. It doesn't even have to be football related. So if you think your expertise is with kids, don't just stick yourself to a football program. Go and look at other ways of teaching kids and engaging kids, and bolt that into what you're doing. So I think that's the biggest thing that they're trying to do now, and I do think it's relevant. So yeah.
Oh, fairly comprehensive. I'll let you get on with your day, but thank you very, very much for coming on. It's been brilliant to talk to you, brilliant to listen to all of your insight and your experience. I can't thank you enough for this, and I'm sure that a lot of people that listen to this will take a lot of value from it. So thank you very much.
Well, feel free to let them contact you, and you know if they want anything else and any other advice I can give. You know, I'm classed as a mentor and a consultant. I don't charge for it. So yeah, if anyone want to speak to me again, please feel free to push them my way, and I'll happily speak to people.
What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Probably by email initially. You've got my email now, right? If not, I'll send it to you. Yeah. If not, I'll send it to you. So I never ignore an email. Never. Even if it's just can't speak right now, I'll get back.
Thanks for listening. Not sure why the recording cut out just a couple of seconds over there. That's Keith saying he's open for communication, and it's someone that I recommend highly that you talk to and try and make use of his candidness and just how much of a fantastic resource he is to aspiring and experienced coaches. Remember, if you're looking for jobs, have a look at the site. Make sure you're signed up. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn and Twitter. Always happy to talk with us or through advice. And if you have any questions about the world of coaching, if I don't know, then someone in the network does, just reach out. Coaches are so happy to help others, as Keith has demonstrated. So if you want any help with anything, reach out and we'll put you in touch with the right person. Enjoy the rest of your week. Talk to you soon.